Welcome back. I hope you had a good breakout session and you made some good connections. Next, we will have a 45-minute faculty panel about teaching with philanthropy. Each of our 4 panelists will answer the question, why do you teach and how do you add student philanthropy? What is the value of this addition? And please put the questions for our panel in the chat.
Hello, welcome. I'd like to start out by introducing the panelists. So to my left, we have Dr. Jonathan Cullick, who is an English professor. He is a teacher educator who specializes in English secondary education. He teaches courses in the methods of teaching high school writing, literature and middle grades, young adult literature, as well as advanced grammar, and he was once a middle school language arts teacher himself. His teaching and research interests include composition theory and pedagogy, English education, American literature and literature of the American South, and the Bible as literature. He has published multiple books and numerous journal articles in these areas, and I think it's worth also mentioning that he's won some pretty prestigious teaching awards. So in 2019, he received the College Teacher of the Year Award from the Kentucky Council of Teachers of English Language Arts. And in 2022, he was our very own recipient of the Frank Senton Milburn Award for Outstanding Professor at NKU. So please welcome Jonathan Cullick.
Thank you.
We also have with us today Dr. Reiko Ozaki, who's a social work professor. Dr. Ozaki's teaching, research, and practice interests are all focused on gender-based violence, particularly intimate partner violence, as well as mental health, anti-oppression, and refugee immigrant communities. Dr. Ozaki is actively involved in both the local and international community to bring resources and support to often underserved populations. For instance, Dr. Ozaki actively works with the local community to create a community of support for refugees and immigrants in the Northern Kentucky region. And she was also part of a collaboration of social workers from the United States who worked with social workers from Japan to create a system of support for domestic violence victim advocates in Japan. Please welcome Dr. Ozaki. We also have with us today Dr. Whittney Darnell, who's a communication professor. Dr. Darnell's research focuses on understanding and improving the conversations people have about their health and wellness in everyday health contexts, such as patient-provider interactions, organizational settings, and as caregivers and health advocates for others. Her work has appeared in academic journals such as Health Communication, Qualitative Health Research, and the Journal of International Research in Higher Education. And I found a quote from one of her students who took a class with her where Mayerson Student Philanthropy Project was implemented. They thought really did a nice job of showing how she implements this in her class and how students are bringing this out into the real world. The quote is, "Perhaps one of the biggest lessons I learned from this course was that there are numerous factors that can influence an individual's health that are uncontrollable by that individual. Learning about the social determinants of health and the concept of health disparities greatly changed my perspective on how to evaluate a patient's situation, and the knowledge I gained from that lesson will stick with me throughout my whole career." So kudos to you. That's awesome. And my name is Dr. Danielle McDonald. I am a criminal justice professor here on campus, and I was also an associate dean in the College of Arts and Sciences. I've had the opportunity to teach with the Mayerson Student Philanthropy Project since I first started here about 15 years ago. And I also had the opportunity to be the faculty director for 3 years, and I've been able to research and publish in this area as well. So really excited to have this panel together to talk to you about the different ways that we implement it. And what I would like to do is start out with a particular question and have everybody go through and answer this. And then if you have questions, please put them in the chat and we'll get to those as well. So this question is really 2 parts, and I'd like each of you to take a stab at it. So how do you incorporate student philanthropy into your course? And can you explain why it is important to you that your students have the opportunity to participate in the Mayerson Student Philanthropy Project? Would you like to go first, Dr. Cullick?
Sure, I'll be glad to. Well, first, I like the way you asked the question when you asked, how do we incorporate philanthropy into the courses that we teach? Because I don't think of philanthropy as an add-on or an add-in to the course. I think of it integrating with the content of the course. So the course that I've been using with the Philanthropy Project, and I've been teaching philanthropy now for about 15, 20 years. There was a period when I was chairing the department, I had to stop out for about 4 years. But the course is English 101, which is college writing. This is the required first-year writing course that most universities require. So I find it works very, very well with English 101 because it's a pretty foundational assumption that in a writing course, students need to have something to write about. And having them write about something that they deeply care about is, let's say, maybe 80% of the battle, like trying to get them to really be invested in their own writing skills. So you give them something interesting to write about, and that a lot more will take care of itself after that. So the way that I structure the writing course with Philanthropy is really just to start with the student learning outcomes of the writing course and then go from there. So in all first year writing courses, students generally will start with some sort of personal writing, personal narrative. We generally do that because they're just like sometimes 90 days out of high school. Sometimes they're still in high school if they're in the high school program. And so we're trying to acclimate them to the university writing for a professor for the first time. And then after that, we gradually get them into using sources and then into persuasive writing. So the way that I integrate Philanthropy is we begin the semester with, you could call it sort of getting in the mood of service. We do a project in acts, like random acts of kindness, personal acts of service. This is actually an idea that I got from attending a teaching workshop that the Scripps Howard Center offered faculty a number of years ago. And Catherine Berger Kay was the service learning expert who was brought in for that. So we do personal acts of kindness, and that then is what we write about. And in fact, my classes right now are working on those narratives, and they're learning to do all kinds of things. For example, I have them take photographs of the service they're doing, and they're learning how to incorporate the photography into their writing and how to format it and make it look nice. And they're also learning about the ethics of photography because we're doing personal service. You can't take a picture of a vulnerable person or someone who's not able to consent. And so I think it's very important to blend in lessons about the ethics of good writing into a writing course, which, by the way, is going to get to the why I teach with Philanthropy. So I'll talk about that in a moment. So from there, we will do what's called a nonprofit pitch assignment. So as a class, we all talk about topic areas that the students are interested in exploring. They get into groups, community boards, they explore nonprofits, and so they start writing pitches to each other. Interestingly, a couple of years ago, a student who was in the high school program suggested, some of us are not comfortable just pitching to each other. And so then we turned it into a writing assignment where they sit in the classroom on discussion boards writing to each other, and then that kind of gets everybody comfortable and they can start talking and sharing ideas. It all leads up to the students writing persuasively. So the students are studying all of the elements of good persuasive writing, but it's all in the context of advocating for their nonprofit organization. Mm-hmm. The audience for that paper is not only me, it's themselves, which kind of changes the kind of language that I allow them to use in the paper, because it can't all be very, very strictly academic, though mostly it is. But they have to think in terms of building a bridge to their audience, others in the classroom, appealing to the values of other students in the classroom, and always assuming the best about their audience, that their audience is a readership that is caring and sincere about the nonprofits they support. They just disagree. So it's a good lesson in persuasive writing. So the why. Why do I do all this, and why do I go to do this work? The extra work, actually, of teaching writing this way. The extra work pays me back. I mean, it's just so energizing. The students just take the course more seriously. I mean, the first day when I tell them what we're doing, and I kind of guide them into it through a writing activity, and then they realize, oh, this is real money. I mean, I can literally just sort of see them sitting up a little straighter. Again, I'm teaching 16-year-olds, 17-year-olds, 18-year-olds, and it's great to see the effect on them. What I want them to get out of the course ultimately is I want them to realize that writing is not just a private good, it's a public good, like education itself. It's not just for your own good, it's something that you can use to help others. So I hope that they will realize that, oh, well, writing is not only something that'll help me succeed in school and in my job, but I can use this to contribute to my community. And I'm very upfront with them and telling them this is what I'm hoping we're accomplishing here. I do hope that they will become aware of the nonprofit sector in terms of potential career choices. And finally, I do want them to become aware of writing as an ethical act. That I guess final thing I'll say at the moment, that there are a lot of bad examples of argument in the media, television, the internet that the students are exposed to. And I want them to be in a writing situation where you can't just yell at your audience. You have to assume the best of your audience, because actually your audience consists of good, well-meaning people who just disagree with you, and you have to establish a common connection with them. And so I love that as being kind of the ethical challenge of the writing course.
Mm-hmm. That's a really great example of teaching them advocacy skills, but also considering the ethical and moral dilemmas that also come along with it, and teaching not only first-year college students, but high school students, and a lot of times too, right? So
exactly,
starting it with that younger group.
Sure, and I'll just add the high school students really step up and even take leadership roles in the philanthropy course to the extent that sometimes in the ceremony, the award ceremony at the end of the semester, I'll have one or two high school presenters up on the stage, and as their professor, I'm just standing in back of them beaming with pride, because I am really, really proud of them.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Yep.
Thank you for sharing
Sure.
that. Yeah. Dr. Ozaki, would you like to go next?
Sure. I really love your stories and the class. I hope my students actually take your class before they come to my class. So I'm Reiko Ozaki, and I teach undergraduate social work students course titled Practice with Communities and Organizations. And they're not that young like your students, but they are a little bit youngish because they are undergraduate students. But in social work, it's interesting that there are a lot of people who come back to school after many years of life experiences. So sometimes I have students who are like 21, 20, even 19 maybe, if they are done with their early part of the undergraduate studies. And then I've had students who's in their 40s, 50s, and even 60s in undergraduate classes. So there's a lot of different population that I'm teaching. But one thing that is really true to the people who major in social work is that they want to help. They come in wanting to do something to change what's happening in the society right now, but they don't know how. They have a lot of visions and dreams and hopes. That's kind of how they come in. So with the Mason project, I use it as a framework for them to learn about community and do something for the community. So with the way I designed my course, I came in with the agency partner agency that I have worked with before I started using Mason framework. And so my students are all social work majors, and they have some willingness in doing something in the community, but we teach them how to assess community needs, how to identify strengths of the community and assets, and what social workers do to help that the community. So I'm using a refugee community in the region as a example for them to learn about working with community. So they learn to assess community needs by meeting with the agency representative. They work with the refugee immigrant community in the region. And then they also have an opportunity to meet with community members, refugee people themselves, and talk to them about their journey and how they are in our community right now. So they learn about the new community. Most of the students don't know anything about refugees when they come to my class. So they learn a lot about the community first. And then they dive a little bit deeper into learning about the needs of the community. So they kind of wear the social worker hat to start learning about what's going on, what social work can do, that kind of thing. And then what I do with the money that's given, the funding given by the Mayerson Project, is to use it as a match. So the students can raise, organize a campaign, online fundraising campaign to raise funds, and then once they meet the certain threshold, then the funding is added as a match to their campaign. So they really get excited about creating a persuasive message and get the word out and advocate to meet the needs of the community. And then also see the money coming in. They ask their parents to pitch in. They ask their friends. I even had a student in the past who wrote to the governor of Kentucky and asked for funding. So I don't know if the money came from the governor's office, but there's a lot of creative juice that gets going for them, thinking that they are making a difference. So at the end of the semester, they also get to meet with the agency representative, the funding person, and other students who were part of the Mayerson Project on campus toward the end of the semester. So I think I really like using the philanthropy component in my class. It really gives a good platform for their learning. They can learn a lot about funding or assessment and things of that nature by reading or my lecture. But I think having the actual hands-on component, it's really, really helpful. So I think it's been a really good addition, and I hope to continue to teach with Mayerson Project.
Yeah, it's really cool how you're able to use it with your mates. So it's a little different than what you were doing. You were doing it with people first coming in. You're doing it with students who've been there a minute and know this is what they want to do. And that's really nice how you've been able to apply the concepts you're learning in class, but then get them involved in the funding as well, right? So they take more ownership of that and get more excited about the money they're giving away because they've had such a part in raising it as well.
And I think one of the things I wanted to add, about social work students is that they want to do something. They think about like a clinical work, but then I always tell them, what about the money? How do you get the money to do that work? That work needs funding to do. So I think it's really important to teach the students about importance of having funding and community support to do the work that social workers do.
Thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
Dr. Darnell?
Yes, thank you. Again, my name is Dr. Whittney Darnell, and I incorporate Mayerson into my health communication class. It's an upper division class. Students in that class, if they're not health communication majors, I also get students from health sciences. I've had nursing students, kinesiology, had sociology, I think, before. So I have students that think they have some kind of interest in being in the healthcare field. And oftentimes they come in always thinking that healthcare means a clinical setting, a patient-provider setting. But one of the first lessons we learned in my class is that health communication, all of us do health communication every single day. If you ate breakfast and you told somebody about it, or you made that even internal decision, you're communicating with yourself or others about decisions you're making about your life and well-being all the time. And of course, when you start talking about more vulnerable issues, if you are deaf or you have something else going on, you're communicating in all kinds of ways about that as well. And so for me, incorporating nonprofits is critical when I'm teaching these students, because when you really get into the lived experiences of some of these vulnerable populations, they don't actually spend every day and every night in those clinical settings. But the nonprofits play a huge role in providing health resources for a lot of people, whether that is food and trying to address food disparities, whether it is my students last semester worked with an organization that serves deaf children. My students this semester are working with a pharmacy that provides free prescriptions for people who are trying to get insulin and other really life-saving medical assistants, but they're not doctors, the nonprofits, but they are communicating with patients, having to reach them as a communication specialist, having to message and do a variety of things as in a different light that they are first responders to a lot of these needs. And no one ever really thinks about our nonprofits as part of health and healthcare. My class is a little bit unique because it is delivered in 7 weeks and an asynchronous platform. So I don't have the students in front of me, and I still have to complete all of the components that Mayerson requires. And so as you learned before, there has to be an element of choice where students are making decisions about how the ultimate funding will be used. And they have to, be able to integrate that into the course and be able to use our course principles in order to make those decisions. So the way I do that, because I don't have a lot of room for error, I don't have 16 weeks to get this done. I have 7 weeks to get this done. I still need them to be able to communicate, even though I don't have a designated time slot of 9 to 10 o'clock. So I do a little pre-work in front of my courses. So I choose a philanthropy for each semester that I teach this course. So as I said, this time I am working with an organization called Faith Community Pharmacy, and they provide free prescriptions for their clients and when they can reach them. But that particular philanthropy has 3 different initiatives that they're working on right now. So they have, for example, a food as medicine training that they're trying to get out into the community to teach people that have some different health things that they're working on, how they can use food to nourish themselves and maybe become less dependent on medications in some cases here and there. They have medical supply drive. They have 3 different things that they're talking to my class about. I then divide the group. I have 24 students in this class. I divide them into 4 different teams. And so what I do require and make upfront with them is they will be required to meet with their team. It can be virtual, but they will have to be present for a meeting with their team for one time. And each group has kind of a different component that they're working on. We're integrating discussion about health communication and the theories that can guide our decision making every single week through some of our other related assignments. They're quizzed on different things. That's all in the background. But in terms of the actual Mayerson work, Team 1, they contact the philanthropy and set up a time with the executive director to interview them about questions they have about each initiative. And they record that so that the rest of the class can be a part of. They self-select into these groups, so I am a little bit nice. I don't just force them into the week. So I'm like, which week works better for you? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And they kind of self-select that way when they look at their schedules. The second group then takes that video and creates a rubric using our theories and our concepts from our text to decide this is how we're going to start comparing these different initiatives. And as health communicators, we are looking at how, what pamphlets they have, their website, what forms and channels of communication is the philanthropy using, and do we feel like these initiatives are positioned to be successful? And of course, that gives me a lot of room for them to, think about, they're not, a lot of times nonprofits don't have somebody that is specialized in this to do this work, and so they're doing the best they can with what they have. But we really get the opportunity to say, how could this be better? Every single choice that you make about a message, who is this even intended for? Why did they use this color? Was the word choice, was that really targeting who they should target? How might we improve it? And as they're discussing that, we're coming up with actual pieces of messaging that we can also send to the director to say, here's kind of some things that we played with looking at your ideas. The next team then kind of reviews that rubric and says, okay, what's missing? What do we still not know? I have a discussion board where people are all kind of collaborating. And then they do a follow-up with the nonprofit to say, okay, we have a couple last questions for you as we're narrowing this down. The class then participates in a vote, and my last team creates a video that kind of is the big reveal of which one they actually chose. And then we're able to send that to the director so that they can see. And my last group did a drum roll, bum, 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 here's what you got. But also, if they're not able to participate in the celebration at the end of the semester, because my course ends 7 weeks before everybody else's, that we have a video that we can share. So it's jam-packed. It does take that work up front from me. But as I said, I think it's really critical for my students. Communication is a discipline. It's a social science. We have evidence-based practice. Most of my students won't go on to do academic research. They will be practitioners in some ways. And I want them to get in the habit of using our evidence-based techniques to think about the content they design, or, my ones that go on to be patient advocates. I have students that have gone on to write policy, that they start to be really intentional about thinking about the real lived and raw experiences of people when they are navigating their health. And when you get in here and you're talking to people that really need their insulin and they can't afford it, you can create a message that speaks to that a little better than just assuming that you know what they think and feel and how they want to access information and what they want to hear. So I think it's a really transformative process for my students. Every time they're apprehensive, every time they're like, I've never done anything like that before, that was really powerful. I never thought of health communication in this way before, and I certainly never thought of nonprofits as part of our healthcare system, but oh my goodness, they are. So I hope you'll ask questions. I hope you'll integrate this into your class. It's powerful.
That was really cool too, because I had never really thought about how to use it online, but particularly in a 7-week online class, it just seems like such a short time frame to me. And it was really wonderful that you explained the logistics of that and how you think about that ahead of time and what you're doing. And it's just really nice to see how you're able to make those connections with what you're doing in the community in an online class. I mean, I'm guessing that most of them aren't getting these types of experiences.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, that's really cool. So I'll go ahead and talk a little bit about what I do. I'll answer the same question. So I teach criminal justice, and most of my students are going to be practitioners, whether that's law enforcement, working in the courts or working in the jails and prisons. And so it's really important to me, like you had mentioned this, I'm going to start with my why first. So it's really important to me that they have connections with nonprofits in the community, because the folks that they're going to be working with, their clients, are going to have a lot of needs. They're underserved populations all the way around. They tend to be the poorest of the poor within our communities, less education opportunities, health care, like all the things, right? So they've got a lot of barriers. And as a police officer or a judge, you can't just be like, okay, well, be a social worker, right? And it's essentially what we need in a lot of these instances. And so it's really important to me to get them to know that these nonprofits exist, to find out about them, and to feel comfortable walking through the door. I think it's one thing to learn about something on a website, but it's totally different to walk in the door and be like, hey, my name is Danielle, and I have a question, and I'm wondering how you can help me. And so what I do in my classes, it's typically upper-level majors. I have taught it with gen ed before in the past, but I typically stick with the upper-level majors because of my why. And I put them randomly into groups, and we usually have 4 or 5, and then each group member has to take on a different role, but they pick the nonprofit. It has to do something with social justice or reducing barriers that people face when they come out of the system, or preventative before they go in. And so that's pretty wide open in regards to what you can access. And so they are to find a nonprofit on their own that addresses those issues. They are to tour the nonprofit. Again, we have students with lots of schedules and jobs and kids and all those things, so I understand that. So it's not required that everybody goes and tours, but usually at least a couple, and sometimes they'll all go, which is great. Go and tour, talk to the nonprofit, ask them questions. What would you do with the $2,000 if you were to receive the award? And really put it upon them that you're advocating, like you're the one that gets to tell their story. And so take pictures, but do it ethically, right? Like if there's a group counseling session going on, then you may be able to take a picture of the back of people's heads or the room, but we don't take pictures of people engaged in treatment and things like that. So that has to come up as well. And then they come back and they put together a presentation. Everybody has the same requirements of connecting it back to the class. What are the theories? What's the information we've learned? Why do these folks need access to these things? What would they do with the money, right? Because that's how you get people to vote for you. And they have to vote for who wins. And it's a lot of fun to watch. They get really into it, as you know, and I love to have them call the nonprofit at the end of class and say, you won, and they're so excited about it. And they do really get into it. And A part of my other part of my why is, I do really want them to have connections with the nonprofits. So one semester I had a police officer who was coming back, full-time officer going to school part-time. And he was in my class, and he told me that he had worked with a program in our area called Homeward Bound. And Homeward Bound is for teenagers who essentially are being neglected or abused and have nowhere to go. And so that makes you truant often, or on your own streets, which is illegal if you're a kid. And so you become a status offender and end up in the system. And Homeward Bound is there to serve as that barrier in between there. And the officer told me that before, I didn't want to see a teenage boy or girl on the street. That broke my heart. They're not safe. So I would take them to the jail. And he said, now I know about Homeward Bound. I know it's a good place, and I take them there. And that's like the win, right? Like that's what we're all looking for, is to have them figure out how they can apply that. And they also get jobs out of it, like an internship. Somebody gets a job and somebody gets an internship. They're juniors and seniors. I always tell them, you're going to be very actively involved in this class. I can write you a reference letter for college or graduate school or jobs, whatever. And you're going to be out there putting yourself out there. So ask people about internships and jobs, and someone always comes back with one. So it's a really great way for them to connect to nonprofits, which they may have not viewed as a job opportunity before, right? They come in very black and white. I'm going to be a police officer. I'm going to be this. But there's really lots of ways to be involved in assisting people through the criminal justice system. Because like you guys mentioned, they're all coming in because they want to help people, right? Mm-hmm. That's their drive for being there. So what are some obstacles, I'll put this out for each of you and go through, what are some of the obstacles you've maybe faced along the way trying to implement things, and how did you overcome them?
Well, I can think of a couple, student-related. So one is, in a way, this is a good thing, but it can be an obstacle. When some students will come into the class when they realize what we're doing on day one, they already have a nonprofit in mind. Mm-hmm. They've been volunteering, they've been working for their church or other house of worship, and so immediately they go into the project with the idea that they're going to advocate for this nonprofit. So I have learned to not only to put it in my syllabus and say it from the first day, here's what I need from you. I need an open mind, because decisions are going to have to be made, and this is an opportunity to learn about all kinds of nonprofits. And I assure them that the easy part actually is deciding which nonprofit's going to be funded. The hard part is deciding which ones are not. Mm-hmm. And so I assure them that when you leave this course, you're still leaving with knowledge of nonprofits that you can support in other ways long after the semester's over. Maybe giving money, maybe volunteering, other ways. So that's just one obstacle, the kind of coming in with that sort of pre-decision, I guess, preconception. And then maybe another obstacle, I don't know if you all experience this as much on the upper division level, but sometimes on the first year courses, we're dealing with students making the transition from high school to college. So sometimes, occasionally, students begin to discover that, when they're absent, nobody calls home. So like we might have some attendance issues, or just other challenges like that, like getting assignments in on time, being punctual, that kind of thing. So dealing with all of that, addressing those issues does require additional effort on my part, and it's something that you have to do. But it pays off, and of course it pays off for the student as well in learning academic skills. Mm-hmm. So yeah, two obstacles and how I address them.
Okay, so with my course, I think I was just thinking. So the obstacle that I can think of right now comes in because of the complicated nature of having a lot of moving parts in my course, and also particularly that is more evident in the online course. So in the course I teach, there are several different sections usually, and one is, in person 16 weeks, and then another is online 16 weeks. So there's a lot of time, but we do have, so I call that Mayason project, and we have the Mayason, but then we are doing the fundraising campaign. So to do that, we use Impact NKU. That's the NKU's fundraising platform that a lot of organizations within campus use. And so we're using it so the students get confused about what's Mayason, what's Impact NKU, and then, so in order for all the students to be able to use Impact NKU, there are these things you have to do, and then there are so many instructions. So when you're teaching it in the in-person class, you can explain a lot of things right there, and students can ask questions. They can help each other understand if there's any misunderstanding. But with the online class, if somebody's confused and too busy and kind of forget about online stuff and come back a few weeks later, they might be like way behind in understanding what's going on. So catching those people up sometimes is difficult, and then because there are also group activities going on, they have to be separated into different teams to create something together, and so sometimes somebody disappears, and some student, members of some teams get really panic and say, so-and-so has not responded, and this is due this week. Well, why didn't you call me earlier this week? So that kind of, last-minute panic happens a lot more in my experience in the online section of the course. So I think it has a lot to do with my particular design of the course, using different components with different deadlines, and online versus in-person sections.
Thank you.
I'd agree with a lot of those things. With the online student, you've got some different. You just don't have some of the same luxuries of making sure you can see that everybody has it. I've rectified some of that, and I don't have as many moving parts as you have, but I'm a big syllabus quiz person in the beginning to really make sure, even things like show me that you have this downloaded, or show me a picture that you have proof of the textbook.
Right.
Or I build a lot of that into my syllabus quiz because, and our policy here at NKU is we, even on our online classes, we have a non-attendance policy. The student has to show that they've done something in the course in the first few days of that course, and so that syllabus quiz is my attendance for that online course that's asynchronous. And so I have them do a lot of those things that are annoying, like I've got to look at instructions and make sure I'm set up for success. I make them do it and show me proof of it in the syllabus quiz to get that out of the way. So I'm not spending, for my team that works in Team 3, I'm not in week 3 still talking about how to get set up with this or that or whatever. So, those low point value things in the beginning of class, they still work as carrots to motivate. And I would say the other thing that I do is, in that class in particular, from the beginning, I tell students I don't want to teach this class as you are students. Like, I want to work with you as peers. Like, you are emerging professionals, and I want you to think of yourself as working for this nonprofit or as really aligned. Some of the things that I do have to watch out for, so because I'm allowing them to take the initiative and reach out and set up those appointments with the nonprofit themselves, I do make them run those emails and things by me. That's not something that I can take for granted that a student knows how to do. Some of that has just truly been lost, and that I'm finding that I really need to make sure that I use that as an opportunity to say, you're representing NKU, and so maybe a different way that we could say this, or what we want to make sure we convey here is this. A really simple example of that is my team just last week, was getting ready to set up a time to interview the and they were going to say, well, we're available at 3 o'clock on Tuesday. And I was like, well, maybe, how could we say that to offer them choice in case this director of the nonprofit is not available at 3 o'clock on Tuesday, even though the team is. And I had to reassure them, if 4 of the 5 of you are there and not all 5 of 5, but it works better at a different time for the nonprofit, they win. They get to, they are our client and they're doing this and we're kind of serving. But honestly, those obstacles have really been opportunities that the students come back later and say, I really feel like I've grown in my confidence as a professional to feel like I have something to bring to the table as a health communication professional, or like I am actually delivering something different, and I have more confidence talking with executive directors or whoever it might be than I did before. And so those aren't necessarily my learning objectives, but definitely outcomes that I feel like we get to receive as part of it.
Mm-hmm. So an obstacle that I overcame, that I often get this question when I would present about this at conferences, and then if you guys were junior faculty when you were teaching this, I'd like you to chime in on this as well. And it's, okay, this is awesome, it sounds great, I'm really into teaching, but I also have to get tenure, right?
Right.
And so I can't do this on top of everything I'm doing, and we've all been there and totally understand that, right? So how do you incorporate it and still move towards the tenure path? And so one of the things that I had done was when I was teaching 2 sections of the same class, we have a survey that we give, a pre and post survey for Mayor Center. You could create your own survey, right? And I was giving the same pre and post survey at 2 sections in the same class. One class was doing Mayerson, one class wasn't. And then I used that for a year, and I had the data from that and compared it. I was able to present at conferences on it and write an article, which I was able to publish. We all probably have teaching journals in our fields where you can publish that sort of work. So I did a lot of things like that where I was doing the same things across. So I wasn't doing totally separate teaching, totally separate research, and totally separate service projects, right? I was making them go all the way across. So I would teach it in my class, and then I would use that as data and write about it, but then also doing service and doing things like this, right? And so I could use it for all that. So those of you that went through the tenure process while you were teaching that, what were some of the things that you ran into that helped you to still be motivated to do Mayerson, incorporate it, but also still move towards tenure? Did you face any obstacles like that, or any ways that you were able to?
Well, I'm on the cusp. I'm waiting on my last letter.
Okay.
So hopefully I
So you're
very soon. But
Yeah.
I would agree with what you said. I've been very successful in health communication researchers do this in different ways, but many of us are very collaborative in our work. Mm-hmm. And so most of my studies are with some source of a healthcare provider, whether it's a hospital or a nonprofit or whomever it may be, but I'm not necessarily working independently, but I need an external partner. And so some of my first clients when I was, I guess I'm technically on the tenure track, but when I was building my portfolio, it's turned in now, so I can't add anything right now, was a nonprofit that I was already aligned with because I was doing research. And so it also served a professional purpose for me because it was something that I could also give back to this organization that I was already aligned and doing work with, and necessarily didn't get anything out of it for me, but building that relationship was important. It also just kept me talking to the same people, so that gets easier to do. So to your point, I think there are a lot of ways that if you are teaching in this method, that you can also be using it as part of your research, or at the very least creating a gift out of some of the principles that you're using. A great idea for teaching. Most of the disciplines have that kind of panel at the conferences that you're talking about what you're doing, so that you're adding some of those things to your portfolio as you go. And so I think maximizing those things, that this can exist in different domains, is certainly doable and a smart thing to do.
And I would say, I just got my tenure. So I didn't. But however, I didn't publish anything out of my experience and data in Mayerson project. But I've been wanting to. It's just that COVID hit, right? So I was going to work on my data analysis one summer, but my summer went, because I had to create everything. And then ever since then, I just didn't have time. So if anybody wants to do something like this and, wanting to, also have some sort of publication, look for someone like me, sitting on the data, wanting to analyze. Just haven't had a chance to, because that's my next plan. So here I am.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
I think the only other thing that I would say is not related to this, but I don't know if you guys experienced this, but I would say not only does this project allow our students to really get a connection to the nonprofits, but I feel like our students that participate in Mayerson have a really strong connection to our university and to our school, and that they feel really good about the practical experience that they got here, that they can then go and talk and translate. And so that's something that I think to people who might be considering this, that are at NKU or not NKU and beyond, doing a philanthropy project like this is also really increasing an affinity and engagement within your own university. In addition to the civic engagement, they feel really good about participating in something like this.
Well, that might be a good segue to a panel that's happening later today, where we have faculty research that's actually going to support with data a lot of what you just said. So I'd just like to take a moment to thank everybody for being here today and taking the time to share your experiences. And it was great to hear all the different experiences and how logistically you've gone about doing it and the differences. So thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Great.